On Saturday, July 13th, the world witnessed the attempted assassination of Donald J. Trump. And no matter how you slice and dice it, there was clearly and definitively a failure of the Secret Service to do its job. And it was not a small failure, but a colossal one. Every former security expert, from former Secret Service agents to FBI and CIA agents to snipers and security experts, all said unambiguously and unanimously that this was a huge failure. Add to all of this, the response by the head of the Secret Service has been dismal, to say the least. We have two reasonable options to take this failed assassination attempt. The first one is to say that the Secret Service, who prides themselves being the world premier bodyguards and security experts that leaves no stone unturned, did not come close to living up to such a reputation. And if we go with this conclusion, we have to say there has to be all kinds of problems behind the scenes where standards have lagged for a long time, and a lot of small things went wrong, adding up to a huge failure. It is not the point of this video to delve into all the minutiae of the many failings of the Secret Service here, as I think we can find many, much more qualified security experts who have pointed out in pinpoint detail what those things are, and there are many. Dan Bongino, who was a former Secret Service agent, does a great job breaking down the many security failures, and I provided a link below so you can see for yourself what he says. There is no doubt this is a failure of the Secret Service, and even they admit it. The second reasonable path to take is that the Secret Service allowed the failures to take place. This is quite an allegation, and one the government and media immediately dismisses as a crazy conspiracy theory. I find it very interesting how an official story has been pinned so quickly before all the facts are in, and anything challenging it is maligned. I think any thinking persons would entertain all theories and look and see if the facts fit or do not fit before coming to any conclusions. Secondly, the Secret Service has many highly intelligent people who are the best of the best and extremely well-trained people in it. So having many oversights, some glaringly obvious even to the most untrained eye, seems so out of character for a premier security service that openly prides itself on leaving no stone unturned. Weeks in advance has to make one wonder just how such a thing developed. Even trained experts like former Secret Service agent Dan Bongino are perplexed by this failure. If it was not allowed to happen, then the only other choice is to go back to the first choice and say they are extremely incompetent from the top down. This opens another whole can of worms, because the failures run so deep, and so much so as to call for an entire overhaul of the Secret Service and those above them in government. But if we say the second theory is correct, we are left with a problem, because leaving the security so lax would mean you are hoping chance will favor you. And if you want something nefarious to happen to Trump, leaving it to chance is not the best strategy, because maybe no one ever shows up and tries anything. So let me go out on a limb here and entertain a theory that is actually plausible, a theory that will be dismissed as another crazy conspiracy theory. But it is not crazy, because experimental evidence says it is plausible. By the way, it is interesting to note that the CIA is where the term conspiracy theory was coined. But what I propose is a theory that would mesh with the second theory that says the Secret Service or the deep state was setting Trump up to be assassinated by allowing for security oversights to happen. Here it is. The assassin, 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks, was a Manchurian candidate. So let us define a Manchurian candidate for those who may not know. The term means one who is being used as a puppet. In 1959, the author Richard Condon wrote a book called The Manchurian Candidate, which details how an army soldier, Raymond Shaw, was captured during the Korean War and was brainwashed by the communists to assassinate a U.S. presidential candidate. So his running mate, Senator Iselin, would then step in and be the leading candidate and become the next president who would help install a Chinese communist dictatorship over America. Is it possible to program someone to become a Manchurian candidate and kill for them, to not realize it later on? Conspiracy theorists claim that the CIA has programmed assassins to kill without them ever remembering that they did it, as in the case of Robert Kennedy. In June of 1968, 24-year-old Palestinian refugee, Sirhan. Sirhan shot and killed Robert Kennedy. 40 years later, he still claims to have no memory of committing the act. Government officials and experts do not believe him. Conspiracy theorist claims Sirhan was hypnotized and programmed to commit the act of murder and to forget it happened and to forget he had been programmed. Darren Brown, a British magician and psychologist illusionist, test on one of his programs whether or not such a thing is possible. I have a link below. It is titled Darren Brown, the Assassin with Stephen Fry, The Experiments. I highly suggest you watch the whole thing because I think afterwards you will be convinced that indeed one can be programmed to commit the act of murder and then to forget or not know they ever did it, as in the case of Sirhan. What is interesting is that I had heard in the 80s many experts in the field of psychology say it was not possible to do such a thing to Sirhan. Therefore, the whole conspiracy theory one can be brainwashed into committing an act of murder is nonsense. No experiments were done, as Darren Brown did, to test whether or not such a thing was true or not. At the end of Darren Brown's The Experiment, Stephen Fry has his hand over his mouth in total astonishment that such a thing was possible in the first place. But there it is for all the world to see. And before Darren Brown went through with the experiment, he asked some leading experts in psychology whether or not this would be possible. And like earlier experts, they said it was not possible or highly unlikely. I think we all may be astonished at how many times the experts are wrong. So we start here. The experiment shows highly skilled practitioners like Darren Brown can indeed program someone to kill and to forget about it. What could a team of such practitioners do? Could they be even more effective? Taken the fact that as more information comes out on Mr. Thomas Matthew Crooks, we see the profile of someone who has issues, someone that could possibly be a profile to be targeted for being programmed to do such a thing. We do not have any evidence that he was. And if there's evidence he was, I am sure the puppet masters behind the scenes did away with it, or at least most of it, making it next to impossible to prove. When you think about what Mr. Thomas Matthew Crooks did, he was clearly on a suicide mission. And for most people, this is crazy. To get yourself into such a state of mind would take a lot of time or a seriously distressed mind that has been that way for a long time. And it would not take much for a skilled practitioner like Darren Brown to push him over the edge. There is no way the security detail was going to allow him to remain alive. As a matter of fact, they could not. Once he started shooting, as every second he remained alive was one more second, Mr. Trump could die or someone else. As we all know, one person was murdered. He had to be stopped before he could murder more. What is interesting is that one building was left unattended, which so happened to have a direct line of sight to President Trump. I call him President Trump because once president, always president. How could that possibly be overlooked? Anyway, this building was left unattended. Bystanders spotted him beforehand and alerted law enforcement, and he was not shot until 26 seconds after he started shooting, even though the Secret Service spotted him before he started shooting. No matter how you slice and dice it, things just do not add up. A whole lot of things do not add up. Even if we say he acted alone, that the Secret Service was totally incompetent in this case, there are so many loose ends and things that do not add up that it naturally lends itself to conspiracy theories. We know his political opponents, who are now in power, do not like him, and that may be an understatement as there is clearly some very nasty vitriol towards President Trump. We know there have been political assassinations in the past here in America, and that in cases like JFK, RFK, and Dr. King, there are a lot of loose ends and things that do not add up in those cases. I think the JFK assassination has so many good books and information on it to saddle any jury with the verdict that it is at least possible that there was a conspiracy involved in his case. Could there be others? It seems like Darren Brown has duplicated the assassination of Robert Kennedy. With the exact same excuse, he did not remember the same thing Sirhan said. He can't remember it. It certainly makes one think. There is a concept called plausible deniability. It means something may or may not be true because there is no proof. It can be used as a method to place the blame on subordinates, as the Secret Service did when it said the venue outside a certain area was the responsibility of local law enforcement, which we now know is not true. Another way it can be used is that if only a select few are in on a plot, like an assassination attempt, those who genuinely did not know something was going to happen cannot reasonably be held responsible, and they can't possibly come out later and tell the truth. And since they did not know, they did not see it coming. This concept of plausible deniability shows up often during investigations of corporate and government officials, because there's a long line of people in any organization, making it very difficult legally to pin the blame on one person or a group of people. For example, there could be a rogue faction in the air freight division at the airport that is stealing merchandise that the rest of the operations knows nothing about. In the case of Ronald Reagan, plausible deniability played a key role in keeping Mr. Reagan out of trouble because it is alleged a rogue faction of the government was involved in illegal activities of the Iran-Contra affair. What I am saying is that we have a situation with the attempt on President Trump's life where things clearly do not add up, and there is plenty of room for plausible deniability, especially if Mr. Crooks was a Manchurian candidate. And things do not add up on a huge level because the Secret Service is clearly smart enough and experienced enough not to overlook so much, but did. And if we have a programmed assassin, which, by the way, I think Darren Brown has proved can be produced, to step into that security gap that is overlooked intentionally, we have a possible theory to explain all these glaring omissions in security. Plausible deniability means we can't prove it. The head of the Secret Service at the time, she has recently stepped down, Kimberly A. Cheadle, has clearly sidestepped and stonewalled Congress with any clear answers on why the security was so terrible. She had more than enough time and knew the questions were coming, yet she appears before Congress totally unprepared, and we know she was more than smart enough not to be unprepared. Why? We either have people this incompetent or they are doing it on purpose. We know they are not that stupid, so it seems to reasonable people they are acting that stupid to avoid getting closer to what really happened. And if there is no conspiracy, we are left with the fact we have a lone gunman acting totally alone because he is so disturbed, with no police or military training actually outsmarting the entire vastly trained government agencies with vast resources behind them, then we are left with a massively incompetent government. Which makes one wonder if those running it, like President Biden and his administration, are not hiring the best but the worst. The Biden administration, Homeland Security, and the Secret Service has vehemently denied any such incompetence. So if that is not the case, then we have to go back to the second possibility and wonder if there is not some kind of cover-up. If you are smart enough not to make such mistakes, but did, then maybe you allowed it to happen in the first place. The question is why? By not answering a lot of tough questions, stonewalling, making lame excuses on national TV, and jumping to conclusions allows for conspiracy theories to fester. Yet they malign such theories. The government is allowing them in the first place. Another problem allowing conspiracy theories is that the government and media have a well-proven track record of lying. Can anyone seriously say the government and media never lie? Anyone? So to just trust the first thing out of their mouth is not what thinking people should ever do. I am not saying that 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks was indeed a Manchurian candidate, and I do not think we can ever definitely say he was. But it is a plausible theory given the facts. So take some time, check out the links below, and tell me what you think. Don't let the media think for you, think for yourself. Thanks for watching. Good medicine.